Okay, I'm going to talk about the kinds of questions that look easy but aren't as easy as they look. They are easy difficult. I'll tell you about the origin of that term. I think I might have mentioned already. And the sequence of examples I'll walk you through all concern the cost of going to a concert. I wanted to pick a relevant example, two musicians that I'd heard of. They're still touring, these two. Clapton has quit a bunch of times, but I guess he runs out of money, so he launches another tour when he runs out of money. Have you heard of these guys? I don't know. They're famous musicians anyway for people in my generation. If you've never heard of them, just treat them as X and Y. You know, how much does it cost to go to their concert? So we're concerned with the opportunity cost of attending a concert by Clapton in most of these examples. It's the value of what you give up in order to do it. I'll caution you again that this definition of opportunity cost is not universal. Some economists treat the term opportunity cost as if it means exactly the same thing as implicit cost. I don't do that. Many of the economists I look up to most don't do that either. If you would ask a randomly chosen professional economist, do you agree or disagree with the following statement? When it comes right down to it, all costs are opportunity costs. Agree or disagree? Well, yeah, I guess I agree with that, would be the answer you would hear from most of them. And so I say that the opportunity cost of an activity is everything you give up to do it, implicit or explicit. So I'm going to a movie. What's the opportunity cost of doing that? I could have earned $10 babysitting. If I don't mind babysitting, that's a cost, an implicit cost, the $10 I won't earn. If there's a $10 ticket price to get into the movie, that's an explicit cost. What's the opportunity cost of attending the movie? It's $20. It's the $10 I gave up by not babysitting and the $10 I gave up by having to buy a ticket. That's the way I use the term. When you see it in the press, probably it's going to mean implicit cost. That's the way it seems to have filtered out into common use. There's no right or wrong answers. These are definitions. How many of you have said a sentence like, hopefully it will be sunny tomorrow? I was taught that's utterly, offensively incorrect grammar. Hopefully is an adverb. If I wanted to construct a sentence using it, I might say something like, I hope it will be sunny tomorrow. That expresses the same thought. Or if I really was determined to make a sentence using hopefully, I would say, it will be sunny tomorrow. I thought to myself, hopefully. But nobody follows that rule anymore. Everybody says, hopefully it will be sunny tomorrow, when that's the thought they mean to convey. And so it's okay to say that now. The grammarians might get all in a knot about your saying it, but there's nothing they can do to you if you say it. I still don't say it, because I'm worried about people my age who look at me askance if I say, hopefully it'll be sunny tomorrow. But this is not something to argue about. I just tell you this to make you aware that not everybody uses the terms in the same way. Okay, example 3.1. You've won a free ticket to see Eric Clapton. The ticket cannot be resold. That turns out to be important. Bob Dylan is the only other thing you're considering. He's performing on the same night. Maybe it's the farewell tour of both performers. You're going to see one of them or you're going to see the other one. You can't see both of them. Tickets to see Dylan cost $40. On any given day, if he were the only activity in town, you'd pay as much as $50 to see him. There's no other cost here. Don't say, what about this? There's no other cost. No babysitters, no cab fares, nothing else to complicate it. These are the only relevant costs in the example. Okay, to summarize, you're willing to pay as much as $50 to see Dylan, and the cost of buying a ticket to see him is $40. Based on this information and using my definition of opportunity cost, what's the opportunity cost of seeing Eric Clapton? You want to go to the Clapton concert? How much is it going to cost me to do that?
$50 because that is the value to me.
I'm going to make this easier for you. I'm going to say it's either 0, 10, 40, or 50. I could have made it harder by saying none of the above, but I'm gonna leave that choice off the list and say it's one of these. Which one is it? Chandana?
Is it 10 because you're willing to spend $50 on Dylan, but you could have only spent 40, then there's like a $10 benefit to you, so you're giving up that benefit.
Okay, I want to know how much am I giving up to see the Clapton concert? Well, if I didn't see the Clapton concert, what would I have done? I would have gone to the Dylan concert. How much would that have been worth to me? The question really is how much economic surplus will I not get if I don't go to the Dylan concert? And that means I look at the value I get by seeing Dylan, and I net out the cost of the ticket I'll have to buy if I go to see him. Suppose the Dylan concert cost $10,000. What would I be giving up by not seeing Dylan? Nothing. I'm not going to see him anyway if they're charging $10,000 for a ticket. What, are you kidding? I want to see him, but not that much. So you tell me I can't go to the Dylan concert. What's my reaction? So I wasn't going to go anyway. So the higher the ticket cost that I have to pay to see Dylan, the less value I'm getting out of seeing him. If he were the only thing in town, would I go see him? Yeah, I'd get $10 of surplus. But what do I give up if I don't see him? That's the number, $10. That's the uniquely correct answer to the question in the framework we're using. A former student of mine did an experiment. He gave this question to thousands of economics students. Actually, they were freshmen, half of whom had taken an economics course in the previous semester. The other half hadn't taken any economics course. More than twice as many of the students who had never taken an economics course got the answer right to this question. Neither group got the answer right as much as somebody who just picked one of these 4 choices at random would have. So the group that had never taken an economics course, they got 17 and point something percent of them got it right. 7.6% of the economics students got it right. So a little bit of knowledge is a dangerous thing in economics. You learn a little bit, you come out worse than if you didn't know anything, at least by that measure. They wanted to know why the students were doing so poorly. I told you on day 1 that my hypothesis is that students don't learn the basic economic principles because the typical course throws way too much stuff at them. It just overloads them with concepts and terms and ideas and equations and graphs so that everything just goes by in a blur. You don't really get any deep knowledge of how to use the basic principles and ideas. That was my hypothesis. They didn't say, oh, no, that's wrong. They said, well, we want to investigate another possibility. And what they wanted to probe was the possibility that the people who were teaching them economics didn't understand the opportunity cost question themselves. And so they went to the American Economic Association annual meetings, which were held in the year they did this in Philadelphia, and they got 200 professional economists to take the same question and answer it. PhDs in economics. The correct answer, which is 10, was the least often chosen answer by the 200 economists that they surveyed. It was chosen by 21% of the people. I wrote a column about this, and I mentioned this finding. I got angry emails from economics professors all around the country. Oh, you meant net opportunity cost. Why didn't you say so? I thought you meant gross opportunity cost. So here's an experiment you can do when you go home tonight. Google those two terms, net opportunity cost and gross opportunity cost. Those terms don't exist. There are no terms like that. There's opportunity cost. Net, gross, no. There's opportunity cost. Maybe some people mean implicit cost. Others might mean, but the answer in this case would be the same, whichever of those two definitions you use, since there was no ticket you had to buy to get into the Clapton concert. The opportunity cost of attending Clapton was 10, full stop. But people didn't get this right. This is, it's not an easy question, I guess. It is easy difficult. This term I got as a result of taking up tennis in midlife. A friend of mine, a professor in the psychology department, and I were saying, we'd had a PE course in college or something where we had tried tennis once, but had never really followed up. And all right, let's learn to play tennis. Maybe it'd be fun to play. And it turned out we were able to book sessions with Eddie Moylan. Eddie Moylan was a top 5 player in the U.S. in the 1940s and 50s, back before the sport had professional paychecks to distribute. He didn't have much money. He taught old ladies tennis in clubs in New Jersey after he retired as a player, and then moved to Ithaca because his elderly mother needed help with her care, and he came here to assist her, and he became the tennis coach for Cornell. If you go up to the Reese Tennis Center, you'll see photos of him on the wall. He's died a few years ago. Lovely man. In his 90s, he died. He would hit with us. He wouldn't take more than $20 from us for hitting with him for an hour and a half. And he would chase after balls. Most tennis pros will just stand there looking at their watch, throwing you balls out of a basket. He would actually play points with you. And he wouldn't give you detailed advice. If you watch tennis pros teaching, they'll give you 10 tips every 5 minutes. It's just this overload of information, and people don't seem to be able to digest it. And they don't make progress nearly as well as if you do what he did, which is just, let's hit. And you watch what I do and see when you get into trouble. So you develop a gradual sense of where you're vulnerable, depending on where you've hit your last shot. And if you were doing something wrong, he might offer some advice, but it would be pretty simple advice. So we'd be playing points. I'd hit 3 serves into the net. A tennis pro might say, well, you're not getting enough torque through your hips. You want to make sure your elbow is straighter when you throw your toss, blah, 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 blah. He would say, aim higher. Just hit it. And it was amazingly effective. My friend and I got better quickly. We still play. We have a great time. We'll never be as good as we would have been if we'd learned when we were kids, but so what? As long as you can find somebody to play. But Eddie taught me the term that I've used ever since, the term easy difficult. He used that term to describe the high forehand volley. Ball's coming at you, you're at the net. All you got to do is put it away. A little bit of an undercut, you put it away. The point's yours. But beginning players miss that shot more often than they make it. Intermediate players miss it alarmingly often. It looks easy, this shot, but it's not easy. You got to practice it. You got to do it. You got to get comfortable with it. It's easy, difficult. Some of the questions on the quiz will be easy, easy. My students made me this T-shirt at the end of one semester. They would have rather seen more easy, easy questions when the tests came out, but looking back, they were probably glad that they wrestled with the easy, difficult questions, because those are the ones that, in the end, added the most value. Here's a variation. It's just like the previous example, except now you're willing to pay as much as $70 to see Dylan, not $50. New question. The cost of a Dylan ticket is $30. Everything else about this question is the same as the other question. How much does it cost you to see the Clapton concert? What's the opportunity cost of attending it? It's, hint, the answer is not the same as before. The value you give up from not attending the Dylan concert is the opportunity cost, in this example, of attending the Clapton concert. You'd be willing to pay as much as $70 to see the Dylan concert. You don't have a ticket, you'll have to buy one, that costs you $30. The surplus you would have gotten by going to Dylan is the difference, 70 minus 30 or 40. That's the sacrifice you make when you don't see Dylan and you go instead to see the Clapton concert. Nothing so far has said one whisper about how you feel about seeing the Clapton concert. That's not on the table. The question is, how much does it cost you to see it? That's the only question you're asked to respond to here. Okay, let's do another one. Same question as before, except now you don't have a non-refundable ticket to the Clapton concert. If you go to it, you'll have to buy a ticket for $60. Same values on the other part of the Dylan option, which is that you would have been willing to pay $70 to see him, and the ticket would cost you $30 to see him. What's the opportunity cost of attending the Clapton concert? Yes? Okay, I'm going to have to buy a ticket if I see the Clapton concert. So the definition of opportunity, the total value of everything I have to give up to see Clapton. What do I have to give up? Got to buy a ticket. That's going to cost me $60. I got to give up my chance to see Dylan. That costs me, as before, 70 minus 30 or 40. 60 plus 40, what's that? That's 100. How much does it cost me to see the Clapton concert? 100. That's the answer, full stop. There's no other number that would be marked correct on a test if you circled it. It's easy, but it's easy difficult. All right. Again, finally we're getting into the benefit side maybe. Again, you got to buy a $60 ticket if you want to see Clapton. Again, you're willing to pay as much as $70 to see Dylan. A ticket to see him costs $30. What's the minimum amount you'd have to be willing to pay to see Clapton to make his concert the better choice? Any amount above 100, arbitrarily close to 100, would make it his option the uniquely correct choice. What if it was exactly 100 that you were willing to pay? Then you'd be indifferent between the two options. Okay? Anybody want to argue that, no, that's not right? I learned economics from a smart guy, and he said the answer should be X. What's X, if anybody wants to argue that?
I don't want to argue that with you, but I just want to ask why, before we said that you have the explicit and implicit cost, so it was 100, wouldn't, instead of having it just be, okay, 100 minus 60 for Clapton, wouldn't you need to balance out that whole 100 plus the 60, or?
What's the value of what I give up if I'm going to go see Clapton? I got to give up seeing Dylan. That's 40. The surplus there I'm giving up is 40. Right. Plus I got to get $60 out of my wallet to buy a ticket. So I'm giving up 60 there. I gave up 40 by not seeing Dylan. I'm giving up 60 by buying a ticket. I gave up 100 to get in the door to see Clapton.
Right.
That's it. Okay. You're done. Want to work more?
No, that's fine.
There is a right answer here. If people use the other definition of opportunity cost, if they think it just means implicit costs, then they'd say, what's the opportunity cost? Oh, that's the value to you of not seeing Dylan. So they might answer the question differently. But you're on notice. I'm not in that club. I'm in the other club. I'm in the club of economists who say all costs are opportunity costs.
To your question, I think you can still do it that way. If you do make a grid, and then you have like 70 minus 30, 40 on one side, you just need to get to 41, you can
And also remember that I told you if you're confused, you're worried you're going to double count, you can always imagine two parallel universes. And you could say, if that were the only option, how much surplus would I get? And then pick the option with the higher surplus. So if you imagine here, there's a Clapton concert costing 60. How much would I have to be willing to pay to be willing to go to that concert if it were the only thing on offer? At least 60. If it's the Dylan event is the only one, how much would I have to be willing to pay to be willing to go to it? At least 30. That's the cost of the ticket there. So I'd get 40 of surplus if I'm going to the Dylan concert. If I'm willing to pay 100, I'd get 40 of surplus if I went to the Clapton concert. So if I'm willing to pay more than 100 to go to the Clapton concert, then my surplus there would be higher than it would be from going to the Dylan concert.
How do you take account of the fact that because the Clapton concert is more expensive, if you bought the Dylan concert, you'd have both the ticket and $30 left over. So you'll have the benefit of the $30 left over as well. So you can get both.
All I care about is surplus. If I go to the Dylan concert, thinking about that all by itself, I'm going to get 40 in surplus. If I go to the Clapton concert, thinking about that as an isolated option, I'm going to get willingness to pay to see Clapton minus 60 is my surplus there. So there's no, if you want to keep those options separate and just say which one gives you more surplus, that will lead you inexorably to the choice that would be best for you, given your valuations. You don't look happy about that response. Come chat with me after class. Okay. You'd have to be willing to pay 100 to make Dylan's the better choice. Yeah.
What if both cost more than you're willing to pay?
If both concerts cost more than you're willing to pay to see them, what should you do? Stay home. Yeah, do something else.
What if you have to choose?
If somebody's gonna, maybe you're with a partner. Maybe your partner says, you're coming with me. Oh, you want to stay home? Oh, that's your right. But then you would pick but if it was your choice, you'd pick the one that had the least negative surplus. Life is one bad choice after another. The hope is that on balance, you pick the mix that is better than the ones you didn't pick. Okay, same question as before, except now you've bought a non-refundable $60 ticket to see Clapton. How much does it cost me to see Clapton? Same 70-30 numbers on the example of willingness to pay to see Dylan in the abstract and actual ticket cost.
40.
It costs me 40 to see Clapton. Why? Because that's what I give up. I'm giving up the surplus that I would have gotten by seeing Dylan. If I don't have any option to sell this ticket that I paid $60 for, it's a sunk cost. It's not relevant. I should ignore it in thinking about how much does it cost me to go see Clapton. That ticket price is off the table. It's a sunk cost. Anything further to add about that? Yeah, let me, thought I had a slide in here. Let me say something about the use of economic surplus for choosing among options. It's meant to be a guide for choosing among alternatives. If we're trying to identify the best option or the better among several options, we calculate the economic surplus associated with each, and the one with the highest amount of surplus is the best option. It is not an absolute measure of how well off you are. I'll send you a link to a YouTube video by an economist at the University of Washington His name is Yoram Bauman, and he's also known as the stand-up economist. He's a comedian. And he deconstructs the basic principles of economics from Greg Mankew's textbook. Greg Mankew is the author of the textbook that supplied the graph I showed you on day one. And he arrives at the conclusion that if you take economics seriously, all choices are bad. So the more choices you have, the worse off you are. That sounds wrong, but here's how he gets there. He says, suppose I've got a Hershey bar and you're willing to pay $1 for it. And I say, you can have this Hershey bar for nothing. And you say, okay, and I give it to you. How much economic surplus did you get? $1. Unambiguous answer to the question. Now he's got the same Hershey bar. He reaches into his hip pocket, pulls out a small bag of M&Ms, and says, look, I've got a Hershey bar here, a bag of M&Ms here. You're willing to pay, what did you say for the M&Ms? 70 cents? You can have either one you want. Which one would you pick? You're willing to pay $1 for the Hershey bar, 70 cents for the bag of M&Ms. Which shall I pick? They're both free. The Hershey bar. If you don't know the answer to that question, you got some work to do between now and Monday morning. The Hershey bar. How much surplus would you get? 30 cents. The Hershey bar was worth $1 to you, but you had to give up a 70-cent bag of M&Ms to get it. You only got 30 cents worth of surplus as a result of the offer I've made to you. Are you worse off than you were before? Impossible to think of any cogent argument that would, he says, now you want to see choices are really bad? Here's a Hershey bar you're willing to pay $1 for, we've established. Here's an identical Hershey bar. You can have either one you want. Which one will you pick? All right, you're not Buridan's ass. You don't agonize until you starve. Say, I'll take the one in your left hand. All right, I give it to you. How much surplus did you get? Zero. Zero. So is economic surplus a measure of how well off you are in absolute terms? No, it's not intended to be a measure. This does not discredit the logic of economic surplus as an aid to decisions that you might confront. It's just a fact about the logic of the model. The better your alternatives are, the more costly it is for you to pick the better set, the best element in that set. You got to give up something of greater value to pick it than somebody who doesn't have any good alternatives. But that doesn't mean you're worse off. Dimitri.
And if you have 3 bars to choose, you have negative surplus.
You know, if I say you can have this candy bar or these other 2 candy bars, both of them, if the 2 together were worth more than this one, you wouldn't choose this one, you'd choose those 2.
Just if you pick one of 3.
If you have to pick one of 3, then the surplus would be the value of the one you like best minus the value of the one you like next best.
And the lowest is just...
It's irrelevant. Yeah, because you can't choose 2 others, you can only choose 1 other. What did I give up? I gave up the value of the better of the best of the other options. You know, this isn't rocket science, but can I imagine a state of the world where I might get questions like this wrong? Yep. I don't have to imagine a state of the world like that. I've seen that state of the world on every first quiz. But you don't have to get them wrong. You know, these are doable. But no matter how deeply I caution you that it's easy to make mistakes on this, people will underestimate what they need to do to get really comfortable. To work some problems, you know, think about it. Talk to one another about these things. Try to vary the numbers in the problems and ask one another, what would it be now? And see if you can agree quickly on what it would be.
So, to that, changing numbers here, what if you value a Dylan concert at $100 value to you, and your benefit outweighs the sunk cost of the cloud to take it? Would you then decline anything?
If I were willing to pay 100 and not 70 to see the Dylan, and I've got a non-refundable ticket, What's the cost to me of seeing Clapton then?
Add the 60 to that 70.
No. That's a non-refundable ticket. It's a sunk cost. If that's 100 instead of 70, the value I give up if I don't see Dylan, which is the implicit cost component, is going to be 100 minus 30, or 70. And never mind what the non-refundable ticket to Clapton cost. If somebody gave it to you, maybe it cost $1,000. You wouldn't have bought it necessarily. The question of whether you should see Clapton is answered by saying, is the benefit to you of seeing Clapton greater than 100 minus 30? Because that's the 70 you'll be sacrificing in order to see him.
So you would go to Dylan.
You have to tell me what it's worth to you to see Clapton. It's going to cost you the difference between 100 and 30, which is 70, to give up the Dylan concert. You've got a ticket to get into the Clapton concert. Is it worth 70 to you to see it? That's what you'd be giving up. You don't have to buy a ticket. You already have a ticket to the Clapton concert. Doesn't matter what it costs. It's non-refundable. That number is irrelevant. So you're giving up something that's worth 70 to you. Is it worth 70 to you plus a little to see Clapton? If it's not, then you should go see Dylan. So you can all make variations and talk to one another and ask you, what would it be then? And if you disagree, then you know you need to do more work. Somebody does. Maybe both of you.
Say that you can resell it, do we assume that you can't?
If you can resell it, then the question is, how much can I resell it for? Suppose I paid $90 for it and I can resell it for $20. What's the cost of going to the Clapton concert in addition to the value I give up by not seeing it? It's the amount I could have sold the ticket for plus that amount.
I think his question was like, if we don't say you can specifically resell it, do we just consider it a sunk cost at that point, right? Like if you don't specifically
shame on me if I don't say it's non-refundable. I should say that because otherwise somebody might assume either option. Okay. Sunk costs are irrelevant. Why do I spend a lot of time repeating that? Because most people behave as if sunk costs are relevant, or they often do at any rate. So here's an experiment. It will be someday regarded as a very famous experiment. 100 years from now, people will look back in wonder and realize it was only 100 years ago that they nailed that down. The traditional economic model makes a very clear prediction about people's behavior in many situations that no human being would imagine to be true. And yet it was only in the 1980s that one of my former colleagues did an experiment of the sort that demonstrated conclusively that the traditional prediction was just wrong. It wasn't accurate. So here's what he did. He went to the Pizza Hut. There used to be one on Route 13, that miserable-looking stretch of commercial establishments on the route south out of town.
So a Pizza Hut near the mall.
Near the, there might be one out there. There used to be one downtown, and that was the one where this experiment, it doesn't matter where it was. And they had an all-you-can-eat lunch every week. You paid $3 at the door. You got in, you were seated. The waiter would bring you a plate with the pizza on it. You ate it. If you wanted more, you'd say, bring me more. He'd bring more, you'd eat that. You want more? Bring me more. He'd keep bringing it as long as you kept asking for more. That was the all-you-can-eat offer. And so people would go down there and they'd pay their $3. So you might imagine that hungry people would be overrepresented in the sample of people that chose to travel downtown to eat lunch on those terms. The experiment was this. One of Thaler's PhD students posed as the waiter at the Pizza Hut for the days of the experiment, and he gave half of the diners in his section a refund of the $3 that they had paid. he chose the half who got the refund at random. They were not less hungry looking or more hungry looking than the others. They were just randomly chosen. And then he kept careful count of how many pizza slices each person in each of the two groups ate. So here's the decision they faced. Shall I eat another slice of pizza? They finished the helping that was in front of them. Should I eat more? That's the decision. Which of the two groups would you predict would eat more, if any, if all diners in both groups were rational, as described by the rational choice model?
They eat the same? It's $3 a song?
The prediction of the traditional model is crystal clear here. It's exactly what Christian said. They would eat the same. Why? Because when you're considering the relevant question, should I eat another slice of pizza, the benefit is the same for the two groups on average, since they were chosen at random. There's no presumption that one group likes pizza more than the other. And the cost of another slice of pizza is exactly the same for the two groups too. It's zero. You've paid your $3 at the door. That's a sunk cost. The cost of getting another slice of pizza, if you ask for one, is zero. So what should the rule be? Eat another slice of pizza if the benefit would be greater than zero. So you keep eating until the benefit of another slice falls to zero. It's roughly the rule you would use when you drink at a public water fountain. Keep drinking until you don't want any more water.
What about the refund? At what point do you consider the refund?
The refund they got right when they sat down. Yeah, it wasn't a surprise to them after they made their choice. They knew at the outset whether they got a refund or not. The ones who got a refund knew they'd gotten it, obviously, but the ones who didn't get a refund didn't know that the other group had gotten a refund. Would that matter? Lauren.
When, if ever, are sunk costs actually relevant? Or is it just never in any situation?
We may encounter an example where a cost looks like a sunk cost and shouldn't be relevant, but it really is something you need to take into account. But for the purposes of the next couple of days, ignore sunk costs. It's not a substantive issue that I'll put in front of you later. But all right, so the rational choice model makes a very clear prediction, which is the two groups will eat the same amount of pizza. If you'd never taken a course in economics and somebody just asked you to predict, well, which of the two groups do you think would eat more pizza? Which one would you have said? The people who didn't get a refund are going to eat more pizza. That's what Thaler thought. That's what each of you probably thought, if you ever thought about a question like that. But no traditional economist ever thought to put that to the test by actually doing an experiment, carefully designed as this one was, to actually see whether the prediction of the traditional model, which is core to its very, very functioning, was valid or not. And so what they found was that the group that got the refund ate way less pizza than the group that didn't get the refund. If you've been in a situation like this, you probably have a little inkling of what was in their minds. They were trying to get a good deal, this group that paid the $3. And so they were at least keeping a mental tally of what's my cost per slice now. I paid $3. I've had 10 slices. I'm down to 30 cents a slice. If I eat another 10 slices, I'll be down to 15 cents a slice. That's a really dumb way to figure out how much pizza to eat. I would be willing to bet if they had done a follow-up survey, call these people 2 hours later, how are you feeling about the amount of pizza you ate? The group that got the refund would be way happier with the amount they'd eaten than the group that didn't get the refund, who would become, oh, why did I eat that last 10 slices of pizza? What was I thinking? But that's what people do. And it's not an isolated aberration. It's quite common that people do this. I was a bureaucrat in Washington for 2 years. I had a guy working for me. He was, in many ways, he seemed like a smart guy. He did one thing that was analogous. He had bought a car, and the literature on the car he bought said it would get 21 miles per gallon in the city and 30 on the highway. He was driving to work, a mix of city and highway driving. He was getting about 14 or 15 miles a gallon. He was very unhappy about that. And what he would do would be go out after he left the office and drive around on the Beltway, the highway that encircles Washington, to get his mileage up. He didn't like the 15 miles per gallon figure. He could get it up to 20 if he drove on the highway sufficiently. That's not rational behavior. You're not trying to get the miles per gallon minimized. You're trying to achieve your goals in the most expeditious way you can. But that's not what people do. But if you know that you should ignore sunk costs, then you'll make better decisions. That's one of the benefits of learning this material. You'll make better decisions if you learn it. People also don't understand the average marginal distinction. You get a benefit from doing 10 units of an activity. You take the total benefit and divide it by 10. That's the average benefit. You also get a benefit from each unit of the activity you do. That's the marginal benefit of the unit in question. And you should focus on costs and benefits at the margin, not on what they are on the average. All right, so here's an example that many people seem to have faulty intuition about. You got a fishing fleet. You can send them to either end of a lake, east or west, and the question is, how should you allocate your fleet? You got a bunch of boats. Where should I send them? Send them all to the east end, all to the west end, or to a mix, some east, some west. Here's some data for you to help you think about it. So under your current allocation of boats, the ones at the east end return daily with 100 pounds of fish each. The ones that you send to the west end come back every day with 120 pounds each. Got that? Sustainable yields. Every day, for the past 20 years, this has happened. So true or false? True or false? If you shift some boats from the east end to the west end, you'll catch more fish. Most people by now are gun shy. If it were true, why would he ask such a stupid question? The answer to this question is false. Do you know the logic rule for answering true-false questions? To be true, it must be true under all circumstances. To be false, you need only show one example of a circumstance under which it is not true. So there's an asymmetry between, it's harder to prove something true than to prove something false. All you need is one counterexample to prove it false. It's really easy for me to cook up a counterexample to the claim made in this true-false question. I will do that in a minute. But first, here's another example. If you come from a country where they don't play baseball, it won't matter. I'll tell you everything you need to know to interpret the example. So you're a pitcher. That means you throw the ball to the batter or try to throw it by the batter. And you have two kinds of pitches, fastball and curve. Never mind what the details of them might be. And the statistician tells you that when you throw your fastball in the current mix of the two pitches that you throw, batters succeed only 20% of the time. They bat 200 against your fastball. They bat 275 against your curve. That means they succeed 27.5% of the time. True or false? You should throw more fastballs and fewer curves. False. This question is false. This statement is false. All I need to do is cook up an example that would be counter to what's stated, and I'm done. So I think the intuition might be easier to see in this example than with the boats. What if a pitcher seeing these data said, oh, well, my fastball is so much more effective, I'm going to throw only fastballs? What would happen? People who know about baseball know where this would go. The difficulty of hitting a fastball is, at least in large measure, you don't know that it was going to be a fastball coming at you in the first place. Some balls come at you at 100 miles an hour, others come at you at 80 or 75 miles an hour, and the pitcher's art is to make them look the same when he winds up and throws them in your direction. And so the fastball is way more effective if you don't know it's going to be a fastball. So it might be that if you threw your fastball more often, hitters would adapt to it quickly and hit 400 off your fastball, and the curve would become much more effective if you threw it less often, and they'd hit only 0.75, 0.075 against your curveball. So you just have to know more than the information given in this description of the problem to know what you ought to do. You can't tell from the average payoffs of the two activities. You need to know the marginal payoffs of them. Okay. Blah, blah, blah is that slide there of what I just said. Okay, here's a table describing an example that under which the statement that, the first one I gave you, the true-false statement, under which the statement would be false. So you've got the east end and the west end. What the table means, you have to know what the numbers in the table mean. If you would send one of your boats to the east end, it would come back with 100 pounds of fish every day. If you send two boats to that end, each of the two boats would come back with 100 pounds a day. 3 boats, same thing. 4 boats, same thing. The east end of the lake is very deep. The fish population isn't that dense at that part of the lake, but the lake's so deep that sending more boats out there, at least up through the first 4, doesn't diminish the rate at which boats catch fish when they go to that end. On the west end, the lake's less deep, the population isn't as big there. The first boat you send, if it were the only boat, would come back with 130 pounds of fish. If you sent 2 boats, they would each come back with 120 pounds. It's not that the one would come back with 130, and the second one would come back with 120. They'd each come, and that's the way fishing is. You know, you send N boats out onto into the fishery. They come back with 1 over N of the total catch each on average. 3 boats, the catch is further diminished per boat. Each boat comes back with 110. 4 boats, 100 pounds each, they'll come back. So if that's the description of the production options at both ends of the lake, then the statement earlier is false. So imagine that we've got 2 boats at the east and 2 boats at the west. We have 4 boats in the fleet. Is it true that the average catch from the boats in the east is 100? Yes. They come back day after day with that amount. Is it true that the average catch from the boats on the west is 120? Yes, that's true too. And we could keep this up forever. Should we move a boat from the east to the west? No. But how would you convince yourself that it would be stupid to do that? You would say, how much do I lose if I take one of the boats that is now on the east and take it away from the east? How much do I lose? 100 pounds a day. Any ambiguity there? That's what I had 2 boats going out there. They each came back with 100. Now I got 1 boat, it'll come back with 100. I used to get 200, now I'm getting 100. I lost 100 pounds by taking that 1 boat away from the east. I'm going to send it to the west. I used to have 2 boats on the west. They each came back with 120, that's 240. Now I've got 3 boats on the west. They each come back with 110, that's 330. How much did I gain? I had 240, now I got 330, I gained 90. So I lost 100 by taking that second boat away from the east. I sent it here, all I got was 90 addition to the total catch. So I ended up worse off as a result of making that shift. But that's not the way people think about these things. They look at the average returns and they just say, do it if the average is higher here. And the resource, if you were allocating it properly and you could carve it up as finely as you wanted, would be to have resources across different activities so that the marginal return to each was the same in every activity. If it's discrete, you can't send 1.42 boats to one end of the lake, you would divide it up so that the last boat went wherever its marginal product would be highest. And the marginal product of the third boat on the west end of the lake is 90. It's not the average product, which is 110. Animals do this. Birds do it. They all get this wrong. MIT students get this wrong. Everybody gets this wrong. And it doesn't matter most of the time because wherever the average return is higher, probably the marginal return was higher there too, but not always, as in the examples I showed you. I've got a video I could show you. It takes 2 minutes. I'm going to say if you got stuff you'd rather do than see this 2-minute video, you're welcome to go. I'm going to play it, but I'll give you a quick exit if you want to do the exit. Who would have thunk? An economics video, you got nothing better to do? These are videos we made. You can get access to these through the Connect package that you have free access to for the next couple of weeks. They're economic naturalist videos.
Why are rotisserie chickens less expensive than fresh chickens? Have you ever walked through your local supermarket and wondered how they could sell a fully cooked rotisserie chicken for less money than a fresh, uncooked chicken? It just doesn't seem to make sense. So why would the supermarket do this? The answer lies in the economics of how demand and supply interact in grocery store delis and meat departments.
Fresh chickens in the meat department.
The demand for fresh chickens varies from day to day and can be hard to predict. So rather than risk running out, supermarkets tend to order more than they expect to sell, on average. But when the inevitable periods of unexpectedly low demand occur, it is not in either the supermarket's or the consumer's interest to allow unsold fresh chickens to spoil. So when unsold fresh chickens begin to approach their sell-by dates, supermarkets put them in the rotisserie and offer them at a discount in roasted form rather than simply discarding them. Days of unexpectedly low demand for fresh chickens are thus also days of unexpectedly high supply of rotisserie chicken. And that's why stores offer roasted chickens at such low prices. And if the rotisserie chicken doesn't sell out, the roasted meat can be used to make higher priced items like chicken salad or chicken soup for the store's deli counter. The incentive to reduce waste and creatively offer more items from the original fresh chicken unlocks hidden value. And since all supermarkets can follow this strategy, competition ensures that the resulting value is then passed on to customers in the form of lower prices.
Okay, we don't end until 1:10. I was thinking that we ended at 55 after the hour. So we actually do have, I didn't need to rush through and give you the option of leaving. But wait till I tell my colleagues that no one left after I gave them a chance. This is going to be the highlight of my teaching career. These videos were almost all of them inspired by economic naturalist papers that people like you submitted. We're going to be making more of these. I would be absolutely tickled if some of you submitted an example that it's got to go by all the co-authors on the project now. There are 4 of us. There used to be just Ben Bernanke and me. If everybody decides that your submission is a good candidate for one of these videos, we'll ask your permission whether we can make a rendition of it, and then students around the country will get to see the insight that you turned up as a result of just looking around and spotting an interesting question that you could pose and then offer economic principles to answer. This is one of my all-time favorites, I'll tell you. It's an interesting question because think of all the extra steps in producing the rotisserie chicken. You know, they've got to have an extra machine. They've got to season it. Somebody's got to put it on the spit and attend to it, get it off, wrap it up, and get it put out where people can buy it. All those extra steps, and it's the price per pound is literally half what they charge for the uncooked chickens in the cooler right next to the rotisserie. A great question. That's man bites dog. Not dog bites man, that's man bites dog. People hear the pattern, it doesn't fit what they expected, and so, yeah, why is that? And the answer is not only plausible, it's almost certainly right. Better still, the days of unexpectedly high supply of rotisserie chickens, which is to say the days of unexpectedly low demand for them, are the days when more fresh chickens approach their sell-by date and get shunted off into the rotisserie to be sold then at a discount rather than stink up the store. And if you don't buy them at discount in the rotisserie counter, they're still useful. They take them over to the deli counter and they make chicken salad and chicken soup out of them. So it's a perfect application of how knowing about a very simple economic model, namely the stick figure supply and demand model, can help you make sense of things you run into out in the world that would otherwise seem puzzling to you. Who wouldn't want to tell somebody about this? I'm guessing there are people in the room who won't want to tell somebody about this, but I would want to tell. I've told hundreds of people about this, and most of them have either found it interesting or have pretended to find it interesting. And you can usually tell when somebody's not interested. You know, the watch comes up, the yawn is harder and harder to stifle if they're really not interested. So practice with this. You know, read the collection. I told you don't turn in any of the examples that are in the collection. I guess I should include the ones that are videos too. Don't turn in ones that we've already considered. But if you come up with something interesting, you know, that's going to be a terrific outcome for you. Most of the ones we get turned in, at least on the first round of the assignment, are not as interesting as the ones that are in the collection. I do not want to run down the hall and knock on Mike Waldman's door and say, hey, listen to this question. There are ones, it's kind of hard to surprise me after all the many thousands of these I've read. But still, I am delightfully surprised by a fraction of the ones I read. And that fraction goes up dramatically between when you turn the first assignment in, which is in the middle of the term, and when you turn the assignment in at the end of the term, your second one. Lots of you will come by, some of you already have, and say, here's my question, Professor Frank, is it interesting? And sometimes I'll say, yeah, that's a great one, go with it. More often I say, you got a couple days left, you might want to think a little further. That's a much more common response when people ask that question before the first assignment than when they come to see me before the second assignment, when it's much more common for me to get a question like, oh, Professor Frank, I've got 3 great ones, which one do you like best? And then they'll tell me about their 3 questions that they're trying to choose among, and one of them will be better than the others, but all 3 of them are better than the one that student turned in on the first round. So that's proof to my eye that this is a skill you can learn to enhance through deliberate practice. There's hardly any skill out there in the world that's not true of, but there are some. If you're tone deaf, too bad. There's not much you can do about that. You can get a little better, but you're not ever going to be a musician if you're tone deaf. But can you learn to be an economic naturalist? Yes, the evidence seems to suggest, I don't have a huge set of systematic studies, but the experience and anecdotal evidence I have is that you can get quickly better at this just by doing 2 of them in a single 6-week period. So take it seriously. You know, it's happened several times. Since this paper doesn't count for much of my grade, I did a cost-benefit analysis and determined that I shouldn't work very hard on it. And that's true in a certain sense. If all you cared about was the contribution of your paper to your overall grade, you might rationally decide not to put much effort into coming up with a good question. The reason for that is that the default grade on these papers is 16 out of 20. If your paper's really bad, it could get a lower grade than that. But if it's disappointing in the usual way, it gets 16. If it's noticeably better than other papers, it might get a 17. A smaller fraction still will get an 18. And in rare cases, somebody would get a 19 or a 20. And so this inevitably results in somebody doing a paper saying, well, I calculated the difference between 16 and 17 and a remote possibility of a 17 or 18 on my final grade and decided that I had other more important things to do. Yeah, I can't quarrel with the logic if all you care about as a reason for doing this is whether or not the payoff is there on the bottom line for your final grade. But I hope for at least some of you, your aim isn't to focus only on your final grade, but am I going to learn anything as a result of this effort I'm taking a couple years out of my life to pursue? And the answer is you'll learn a lot more if you take this exercise seriously. I think this is the exercise that will add the most value of anything you do in the course. Students come back to me at reunion time, Professor Frank, listen to this, and they'll start rattling off questions that they've thought of in the years since they've left the campus. Mostly when people leave, they get worse at everything they learned. That's just, it's use it or lose it. These people, they've been out 10, 15 years. They're better economists 15 years out than they were the day they left, because when they're out there, they're interacting with people in the world, they're processing information, and they're making decisions about what to do, and they're asking questions as they go along. You know, why are they doing it that way? Why is this product feature designed the way they did it? And almost always, you can get some purchase when you're trying to answer questions like that by saying, well, what were the relevant costs and benefits of doing it that way as opposed to some other way that you might have done it? If there's not a men's room on this floor and you're looking for a men's room and there's a woman's room right there, what's a reasonable algorithm to use? Go to the floor above or below and there'll be the restroom you're looking for there. Why? Because it's cheaper to build the buildings with the restrooms on top of one another, because the pipes all go in and out of the same routings. Think about the patterns that you run into, and you'll get better and better at this. Anyway, thank you. And look for an email from me telling you where to go. And if you want to come to the review session, which you might or might not want to do, it'll be here, 1 at 6.